Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to look at the Horror at Devil's Run Foundry Kickstarter. We're going to talk about Free League removing PDFs from Alchemy. We're going to look at Thrones and Bones, the player's guide and the campaign guide from Lazy Wolf Studios. We're going to take a look at the impact that D&D has had in people's lives, according to some submissions from people to Washington Post. We're going to dive deep into the idea of infiltrations, and specifically infiltrations at the Masquerade of Summervine Villa. Summervine Villa being an adventure toolkit available in the City of Arches. And we're going to cover more questions from the August 2024 Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. If you enjoy this show, please check out the City of Arches Kickstarter. The City of Arches is a high fantasy city sourcebook for lazy DMs. It's a city built on intrigue and adventure and discovery that you can drop right into any existing campaign world, whether it's your own homebrew setting or a published adventure setting. It is packed with awesome material to help you build really cool adventures for your characters. There is a 42-page free sample, which includes an introduction scenario and an adventure that you can run at your table tonight, along with all of the material to show you what this book is about. That is all available on the Kickstarter site. You can find a link to that in the show notes. If you like the work that I do, this is a fantastic way to support me and the work that I do. Please check it out. I do not think you will be disappointed. My friend Jeff Stevens is running a Kickstarter for Horror at Devil's Run. This is an adventure that's already been out. It's kind of a fun adventure. Specifically, it can work really well as a Halloween adventure. It was published about a year ago. He is currently working on a version of this for Foundry and seeking funding specifically to develop a Foundry version of Horror at Devil's Run. So it's a small run, small Kickstarter, but you can pick up the PDF of the adventure during this campaign for $5. I've previewed this in a previous show, so I'm not going to dive too much into the adventure itself, but it is a really cool adventure. People really dig it. It's very inexpensive, $5 PDF to pick up this adventure. And if you are a user of Foundry, I'm becoming more of a fan of Foundry. I don't use it a lot because I'm not a big, heavy VTT user, but I really like the philosophy and the style, and I recognize the popularity that Foundry has. I think as a community, we're gonna be talking more about what it means for virtual tabletops to operate inside of the RPG community and what ones are operating well on behalf of their customers and what they can kind of do later on in this show and also probably in future shows. But Foundry is a really outstanding one because it is a platform that you can purchase and you can download and you can keep, and the stuff that you include and purchase and download and keep, you get to keep as well. So Foundry is really excellent, and I highly recommend taking a look at Foundry if you use virtual tabletops. But specifically, if you use Foundry, take a look at the Horror at Devil's Run Kickstarter. I can't remember. He probably sent me a free version of Horror at Devil's Run. I'm almost certain that I backed it as well. So this is not a sponsorship. He did not give me any compensation for this, but it is a really cool adventure. So check it out. Great way to get the PDF. You'll get the PDF right away because the PDF's already developed, and he is using this to develop a cool Foundry version of Horror at Devil's Run. So check that out. You can find a link in the show notes to the Horror at Devil's Run Foundry development on Kickstarter. I always love kind of like listening to community folks. And one person, whenever I hear that he is on a podcast, I go and I listen to it. And that's Rob Heinsoo. Rob Heinsoo is one of the two developers of 13th Age. Rob Heinsoo and Jonathan Tweet are the two developers of 13th Age, one of my favorite role-playing games. There is a 13th Age version 2 coming out. It has already been on Kickstarter. I think you can still pre-order it on Kickstarter if you're interested in getting in on it. And Rob has been on a bunch of different shows, a bunch of different podcasts talking about 13th Age. And they had him over on the Gnomecast podcast talking about 13th Age. He's an absolutely delight to listen to. I really like super experienced in role-playing games, really interesting thoughts and design and opinions about the way RPGs should be. And it talks a lot about what 13th Age version 2 is going to be like. I am really looking forward to 13th Age, the newer version of 13th Age. I'm kind of waiting until all the books are out and physically and in my hands before I'm going to run it, but they've been doing play testing on it for some time now. I have played the the original 13th Age and loved it. My group really loved it. I met one of my favorite players that I've played with who was reading the 13th Age book in a coffee shop. And I said, oh, 13th Age. I know the guy that made that. Really, really great stuff. So if you want to learn more about 13th Age, you want to hear Rob Heinsoo, who is a developer on the 4th edition of D&D. Jonathan Tweet was a developer of the 3rd edition of D&D. They are partners on 13th Age. If you want to hear what that's like, if you want to hear his thoughts on game design and everything else, check out the Gnomecast podcast. There is a link to that in the show notes below. Subscribe. Really, really fun podcast. I very much enjoyed it. This past week, I got an email from somebody who said, hey, with all of your talk about good and bad behavior when it comes to digital products in the tabletop role-playing game space, here is one that should catch your eye. And that's that Free League, the role-playing game company behind a whole bunch of different role-playing games. Dragonbane, Vesane, Blade Runner, Alien, Walking Dead, Lord of the Rings, Twilight 2000, Tales from the Loop, Symbarium, Morkborg, Pirateborg, tons of different games that Free League runs. Well, Free League had a Humble Bundle recently, and it was really cheap. So if you're listening to this, the bundle is just about to end. The Humble Bundle is just about to end. And it is really an insane deal, like 50 different items, including the Dragonbane Bestiary and other Dragonbane accessories, Coriolis, Vesane, tons of different products that they are including in this massive Humble Bundle. And I think if I'm making an assumption about what happened is the company, Free League, thought, sure, doing a bundle for stuff on the Alchemy virtual tabletop. Alchemy is a virtual tabletop, one of many. Alchemy is a virtual tabletop that specializes specifically in more cinematic style gaming, less of a focus on maps, though you can certainly do maps, but they kind of like use backdrops and music and other sort of elements to really kind of draw you into the story. I think that is very cool. I've talked to some friends of mine who really like Alchemy as a virtual tabletop. But one of the things Alchemy does is they include a PDF of all of the products that you get when you pick them up on Alchemy, which is an incredibly good value and a really good service. And we're gonna talk about why they do that and their statement about that. I have a feeling the people at Free League did not realize that the PDFs were going to be included along with all of the other stuff that's available on Alchemy when they did this Humble Bundle. So the idea that you're getting 50 different RPG products for $30, that's like, 60 some cents per product, and you're getting the PDF of that product along with it is sort of like the value of the thing just went up by double. And the PDFs can be used with like all different kinds of platforms. So I have a feeling that Free League realized, especially after selling almost, they sold like 8,000 of these, 7,200 of these bundles have been sold at this point, that when they sold these, they said, oh my God, we didn't realize PDFs were included as well. And then their value proposition changed quite a bit. Like it's $1,000 value that you get for like 50. You pay $30, $35. You get $1,000 worth of products, which is, you see how that's how Humble Bundles and Bundles Holdings and things like that go. Anyway, a note came out from Free League that said, hey, you're receiving this message because you purchased Free League material on Alchemy, and Free League has decided to no longer include the PDF version of a product when you pick it up on Alchemy. That even though this is kind of the default of what we do, and many publishers include the PDF along with whatever you pick up on Alchemy, that Free League will no longer be including PDFs. You will still be able to download PDFs of Free League's titles you purchase in the next 7 days, but on Wednesday, August 21st, which is this coming Wednesday, just a couple of days after this recording goes up, that they will no longer have PDFs available for Free League products. Now, I don't know what that means for the people who pick up the Humble Bundle and then go grab the PDFs. And honestly, I don't know how good I feel about the idea of like, oh, go get the bundle and then go grab all those PDFs while you still can, when it's clear the publisher didn't really want that to happen, right? The publisher thought that that's probably too good a deal. And I can recognize like that, that is really ridiculous. And the idea of getting like Dragonbane, which is like a $30 PDF and you're getting it for 30 cents, right? That's pretty ridiculous. But I also recognize that this is like one of those instances where we watch a company who tries to pull back the digital holdings of what they have. So I'm kind of torn in a bunch of different ways on this. I can recognize that it is really cool of Alchemy to be able to include PDFs of the RPG products that you buy on Alchemy. That's something I don't think any other virtual tabletop that I know of gives you PDFs of the products that you're buying on that virtual tabletop along with the material in the virtual tabletop. Alchemy is unique in that function. Roll20 doesn't do it, Foundry doesn't do it, Fantasy Grounds doesn't do it, D&D Beyond doesn't do it, nobody else includes PDFs along with it. Many times you can get PDFs as a separate product. And as a publisher, I think about that. Like, yeah, when I sell you a physical version of Forge of Foes, you get the PDF of Forge of Foes when you pick it up on our web store. We include that along with it. And part of the reason why is like we're charging a lot of money for Forge of Foes, right? The book itself is expensive. So the idea that we're giving the PDF as well, the cost to us is basically zero to give you that PDF. The cost to make the PDF was not zero, right? The cost to make the book was not zero. But I certainly think like if we were doing some kind of bundle of holding where we included multiple products, the idea that we would include multiple versions of the same product for that ridiculously low price, I can understand why a company might be able to say, no, you're only going to get one version of it. You're not going to get multiple versions. An example would be, would I give away the print on demand coupon or code to be able to print on demand versions of PDFs if I'm giving the PDFs away for like 60 cents? And the answer is probably not, right? I probably wouldn't include that. Now, an example where I am is like on the City of Arches Kickstarter, which is going on live right now, and you can check it out. Check out the link in the show notes to go to the City of Arches. One of the things we're doing there is we're selling the back catalog of other Lazy DM and Fantastic products. And for the Fantastic products, which don't have any kind of offset printing, even though you're buying the digital version of the product, I am going to include a link to be able to get the print-on-demand version. And those are discounted, but they're not discounted like this is discounted, right? These discounts are very, very low. So a question is like, how bad is this, right? Like when we see a company that pulls back a feature that they used to have of like PDF, I don't think this is that bad. First of all, you can understand why it happened, right? You can understand that they went, oh my God, we just gave away 50 books in PDF for $30 along with the Alchemy version. We thought it was just the Alchemy version. So that's one thing you can kind of understand. The other big one is that Free League still sells all of those products in PDF. So they're not taking a version of the product away completely. They're not saying we're no longer selling PDFs anywhere. You can only get physical versions, or you can only get like DRM'd encrypted virtual versions. They're still selling the PDFs. You can go to DriveThruRPG and pick up the PDFs. You can still get the PDF along with the physical version when you buy it from the Free League store. So the format of the PDF is still there. And when I talk a lot about like the value of, where we put our money into things that we get and we get to keep, I'm not dictating business policy. If they want to charge a lot for it, they can charge a lot for it. If they don't want to include it in one package or another, they don't have to. But I do like it specifically when I see companies that sell PDF versions of their products so that you can download them and put them on a hard drive and know that you'll have it forever and know that they can't take it back. In this case, is Alchemy actually taking it back? Not really, because you can go and download it and you still have it forever. They're just removing the ability to go get it from Alchemy later. So that's an important question. There was one thing I wanted to highlight in this whole discussion, which was Alchemy's stance on PDFs. This went along, I have it here in Notion, but I got it in an email that somebody had forwarded to me from Alchemy, where they were telling somebody, hey, you had previously purchased a Free League product. If you want to grab it, now's the time because it's going to be off. And this is something that they said about Alchemy's stance on PDFs. Our team spends weeks hand entering the complete contents from every book we convert into the Alchemy universe. It's our hope that a universe can provide an even better way to access the contents of a book when using a digital device. However, we strongly believe that our customers should be able to download a digital hard copy of everything they buy on Alchemy for two main reasons. First, we are passionate about addressing what we think is a broken buy model in TTRPGs today, where customers are forced to purchase a title multiple times in the format that they wish to enjoy that content, whether that's a physical book, PDF, or VTT module. This is not a simple problem to solve, as books have material costs associated with them, and VTT assets have many hours of development time invested by third parties like us. Being passionate about this issue, we freely offered hundreds of thousands of Alchemy modules to creators to fulfill on crowdfunding campaigns and to offer alongside the purchase of their physical books. It's been our hope to create arrangements with all of our creator partners, making this a standard for our platform and the VTT space holistically. Second, we understand that cloud-based services like Alchemy, Roll20, Demiplane, etc. aren't guaranteed to exist forever. If the servers behind these services shut down, the investments you've made in content for those services inevitably go with them. Offering PDF downloads is one way we can provide an immutable value for your investment that can never be taken away from you. These are sentiments that many of our creator partners also share, but every business is different, has external partnerships and obligations they must consider, and revenue models that take time to evolve. Alchemy will continue to be led by innovation in the development of our platform and services, remain focused on modernizing the buy model in TTRPGs, and strive to be the best place to buy, build, stream, and play role-playing games online. We apologize for this sudden change and sincerely thank you for your support. If you have any questions, blah, 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 you can email him. I thought that's really good. Like, that's a very strong stance, and that makes me much, I'm more proud of Alchemy as a VTT platform for recognizing that issue. Their talk about the broken business model of virtual tabletops is interesting because if you know me and you know what I've been talking about a lot, I feel that like I really want to be a champion for the consumer of RPGs in the digital space. I don't necessarily think we have a right to multiple versions of the same product when those versions are significantly different from one another. So it's interesting that they do. They feel like it would be great if you could have one single version of a product and use it on multiple platforms. But the reality is those platforms are not making money from the platform itself. They're making money from the content on those platforms. And I can tell you, I've only made a couple, but I've made a couple of versions of my products on virtual tabletops, and it is expensive to make. And another hard reality is you generally don't make the money back, that not a lot of people buy these things. As a smaller publisher on a bigger platform, unless you're marketing it extensively yourself and you have a big marketing arm, you're not really making the money back that it costs to convert these things into those formats. Which means you really shouldn't, as a consumer, I don't think, should expect that when you buy it once, you should be able to use it everywhere in every format possible. I don't think it's reasonable for us, for example, to say, hey, I want to be able to buy a PDF on Drive-Thru-RPG, and I also expect I have a Roll20 version, a Foundry version, a Fantasy Grounds version, and it's on D&D Beyond. And I should get it all those places for $5 or $10, right? That's not reasonable because the amount of effort it takes to convert it to Roll20 or Foundry or Fantasy Grounds or everything else is significant. And that needs to be compensated or it's not a working business model. So their first argument is an interesting one. And it's certainly one to talk about. And it's certainly one to ponder and investigate, and maybe companies will try different things and we can think about it. But I don't know that I necessarily agree with the idea that whenever you buy a single version of this product, you are sort of owed that same product in other formats on other platforms as well. I don't think that that's the case. But I do very much agree with their second one, which I've talked about a lot, which is not all these services last forever. They don't always operate the same way. They can change their business model. They could die. They could just go out of business. They could get sold. Like D&D Beyond was sold 3 times, right? It's changed hands a lot. So they can change the service. And that means if they change the service, you are along for the ride and you don't have any choice for it unless you have a downloadable version of it. I talked about Foundry earlier in the show. One of the reasons I like Foundry is you have the option, and Foundry knows this too. They also say things similar to what Alchemy says here. We want you to be able to control your virtual tabletop with the products that you bought on it, even if we change our business model and change stuff like that, which is why I think Foundry is so strong. And as a for the freedom that it gives you for that. And it sounds like Alchemy wants to do the same thing, but Alchemy is an online tool. So they recognize the only way to offset the fact that they're an online tool is by including a PDF so that you can still download the material and have it. But then, of course, it's a separate product. And then we get back to why Free League did this. I think it's a really interesting situation. I don't have a firm stance. I'm not pointing at Free League and saying, wow, Free League, how dare you pull PDFs away? That's anti-consumer. You're hurting the RPG industry. It's I think somebody made a mistake. And I think that somebody, accidentally didn't realize that PDFs were going to be included and then gave away 50 of them for $30, which is crazy, crazy low. And so I can understand why they're like, oh man, we got to put a stopper in this or we're bleeding. We could hurt our business for years. I also recognize that you could be very angry if you're like, hey, I had bought these previously and I bought them because I like the fact that I could get the PDFs and now I can't anymore. And now that's going to limit my interest in buying products in the future. I can see that. So there's lots of different facets to this whole situation that I think are interesting. And this is one of the things where it's like, as more and more RPGs are getting played in a digital space, these are some of the questions that we need to be considering as GMs on which platforms we support, what kind of features do they give us, what kind of safety nets do they have for us if they decide to change models and things like that. These are all questions that we're asking. And this was an interesting one that came up that I wanted to talk about. This past week, I received a cool product was sent to me from Lou Anders, who runs the studio, Lazy Wolf Studios. I like it because it has the word lazy in it. And he sent me a copy of the Throne of Bones Player's Guide. This is the first labeled Tales of the Valiant compatible player's guide available for Tales of the Valiant, and it's up on DriveThruRPG. You can find links to it in the show notes. It's already published, so it's not a crowdfunding campaign. The book has already been made, and it's part of a larger series of the Thrones and Bones campaign setting, also by Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios. And it is a sort of a northern Nordic style fantasy setting and player's guide that's built from the lore of a series of novels that Lou has written. Really, really excellent design, very cool looking books. All of these are review copies that I received from Lou, but I received no other compensation. Now we all have to say this these days. I received no other compensation for this, and I just thought they looked really cool, and I wanted to share them. What I think is interesting about the Player's Guide to Norengard, which is the Player's Guide version of this, which you can get on DriveThruRPG, is how it is built around character options specifically for Tales of the Valiant. I had actually talked to Lou about this during development, because we were talking about, like, would you write products specifically for one of the flavors of 5e, or write them to be generally 5e compatible? With City of Arches, for example, I wanted it to work with any of the versions of 5e. I didn't want to limit it to just Tales of the Valiant or A5e or 2024 D&D. I wanted people to be able to play it with lots of different systems. But Lou had very specific things that he wanted to build that fit well with Tales of the Valiant, like lineage options, like new heritage options, like class options that fit alongside the classes that are available in Tales of the Valiant. So who would this be for? If you are looking for a cool northern Nordic style setting, Thrones and Bones looks like it would fit that very well. And if you are looking for new character options specifically for Tales of the Valiant, this would be an interesting book to check out, where you have a bunch of different kinds of heritages, a bunch of different kinds of lineages, and how they fit specifically in this section, like the Huldra folk. I think you could probably mash up a lot of this material with the northern sections of Midgard as well. I have just finished playing my Empire of the Ghouls campaign, and a good chunk of that took place in the northern realms of Midgard, which also have a very much of a Nordic setting. The northern gods, even the named gods of the north, like Thor and Loki. So you could take a lot of this material. You could either run it in its own setting, as it is here, or you could use this to kind of fill out some interesting options if you were going to run a northern setting in the Midgard setting, which is also made by Kobold Press, who made Tales of the Valiant. So, hey, look, actual random names. I was complaining that none of the character sections of the three most recent versions of 5e include random names anymore. So it's nice to see some names if you're actually building characters in here. What I think is really neat, this is where I think that, like, 5e really is super strong, and in my opinion, look at the artwork is really, really good, by the way. Artwork, design, layout, all of it looks excellent. And I like it very much. I didn't dive deep into the mechanics of it, so I can't say, oh yeah, it's absolutely super balanced. And I haven't read enough of it to say, oh, the editing is absolutely top notch. But I can tell you, it sure looks nice. That's creepy. She's got a big hole in her back. I don't know what's up with that. But one of the areas where I think it's, like, super strong to play 5e is when you do, like, what the Adventurers League had done originally, which was, like, the core +1 idea. And the idea is that like if you've got players who are familiar with 5e and who enjoy 5e, the way to keep your campaigns fresh year to year is to say, for this campaign, we're going to use the core book plus this one other specific setting book built around the specific environment, so that the kind of characters they build are different than the kind of characters they could build in a previous setting. I did this in my Empire of the Ghouls game, where I said we're going to use the 2014 Player's Handbook, and we're going to use Heroes, Midgard Heroes, and the Tome of Heroes books from Kobold Press, but not Xanathar's or Tasha's. And it meant that the players had to stretch a little bit in like, oh, well, let me pick some of these other builds outside of the normal builds. And I think this is an example where you can combine Tales of the Valiant, which is brand new itself. So I think like everybody playing Tales of the Valiant is going to want to learn how to play Tales of the Valiant. But if you say, but we're going to have a more northern Nordic focus for our game, well, here's a supplement, a 52-page supplement you can pick up that adds specific flavor around that kind of setting that you can stack right on top of your main book. Then if you're playing another one that's Underdark based, you can tear that one out and put another one on there. And that idea of like bringing in groups of subclasses and features and spells and other elements that thematically change, backgrounds and talents and whatever, things that thematically change what 5e looks like to fit it around a specific setting. I think that's a really cool idea. And I think if you're specifically interested in sort of a more northern setting, and if you really want to dive deep into the lore, there's these series of novels that Lou has written that can give you tons of background lore and to be able to build out the stories that you want to run in this campaign. So that is the Thrones and Bones Player's Guide. There is also the Thrones and Bones Campaign Guide. This campaign setting is more 5e general, so you can use it with any of the 5e variants, where the Player's Guide is specifically towards Tales of the Valiant. Both of those you can find on DriveThruRPG. There are links down in the show notes to be able to pick those up. They look very cool. Check them out. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was, Washington Post had a really interesting article with a lot of sort of big-time personality types that could talk about their memories of Dungeons and Dragons, called For Dungeons and Dragons, the Magic is in the Memories. They did, so that article came out. I didn't talk about it on the show, and it's kind of interesting. It's got like, you know, what it meant to, you know, Anderson Cooper, Matt Mercer is interviewed in here, Lev Grossman. They picked celebrities to talk about what Dungeons and Dragons meant to them. They got a bunch of different letters from people saying, hey, this is what Dungeons and Dragons meant to me, which I think is personally a little bit more interesting than like what the celebrities think of it, although it's certainly great to see the kind of impact that it's had for people who have lots of attention other places. But this article I found really talks about and has a more diverse group of people that talk about what Dungeons and Dragons did and how it helped them in their lives. And this is something where like we dive so deep into the topics of the RPGs overall, of specific editions and things like that. And we argue about like, oh man, is the game going to break because of Topple? You know, I'm making fun of myself on that, right? But it's really always interesting to hear what the game means to people in our lives. I don't think it's a big surprise for many of us to say, oh yeah, RPGs have had a huge impact in their lives. They have a massive impact in my life, right? Huge impact in my life. And one thing is that I get on is like how important role-playing games are. That RPGs are one of the few hobbies that truly bring people together in an environment where it's not like super quick, kind of, you know, fake social connections, but actually really strong social connections, and in a way that we want to do regularly, right? That when we want to be able to keep it up regularly from time to time, yeah, helps us build our support group. It's really important. I think it's really important in our lives. And I think RPGs is a fantastic catalyst for us to get together with friends as adults that we don't really often have. So I think it's really strong. So, and that comes out in a lot of these discussions about how people found D&D or how they brought D&D to other people and what it meant for them, how they got through COVID with it, how they got through depression with it, how they got through other harder elements of their lives. So really fascinating article. Washington Post is hidden behind a paywall, but there is a gift version of the article that I'm going to link to. Hopefully that will work. I don't know if the gift article works forever, but I will link to the gift article in the show notes and hopefully you'll be able to read it. If not, you probably find it on like archive.org or something like that. Or you can subscribe to the Washington Post. I like the Washington Post a lot, but really interesting article. The City of Arches Kickstarter is going on right now. You can find a link to it in the show notes where you can get access to a 42-page sample preview of the City of Arches. The City of Arches is a high fantasy city sourcebook built for your campaign, whether it's a homebrew campaign setting or a published campaign setting. You can drop the City of Arches in it. It's filled with adventure and intrigue and discovery and lots of ways to bring in a tremendously diverse set of characters in order to really have fun in a very cool place. One of the things I wanted to talk about today is a specific adventure toolkit that's going to be included in the City of Arches sourcebook called The Secrets of Summervine Villa. This was actually released as a Patreon feature as well. I've now run it a couple of times, and I had the opportunity to run this in my Wednesday group. The Secret of Summervine Villa is a adventure toolkit that is specifically designed to help you build out your kind of adventure and scenario around sort of an infiltration style scenario. And that is how I ran it. Like I said, I've run it a couple of times. I ran it as a one-shot one time, and now I've run it as part of a larger campaign. And I ran it this past Wednesday, and not everything went perfectly, which is what I wanted to kind of dive into and dissect and talk about, because the game, it wasn't a disaster. I mean, some people would say that the result of what happened was a disaster. So we'll talk about that. People still generally had fun, but I wouldn't say that it was the best session I ever ran. And there was probably a couple of things I could have done that would have made the session run that much better. And they are things, luckily, because it's a continuing campaign, that I can do in my next session on Wednesday to make it run smoother and kind of go in a central category. So Secret, like I mentioned, Secret of Summervine Villa, this is the Patreon version that I'm showing today because we don't have Secret of Summervine Villa laid out yet in the full City of Arches book. But if you want to see what the layout and the art and the style is going to be like, you can check out the 42-page sample that we have on the Kickstarter page to see what it's going to look like. This is the black and white version that is available to patrons right now. Again, designed for the City of Arches. And the idea with the toolkit is you can kind of build what you want from it. It is a location, it is a bunch of NPCs, it's a bunch of specific situations, and a bunch of different kinds of goals. And you can kind of build a story around it. And rather than having an adventure that says, this is exactly what happens, you instead get to use the toolkit to build the kind of adventure you want to run. And what I decided I wanted to run was a masquerade ball. That there was it was Demon's Day in the City of Arches, which is when everybody kind of dresses up in costume and runs around the city and gets in all kinds of trouble. And that as part of Demon Day, the Summervine family was going to host a masquerade ball. But secretly, the Summervine family is doing evil things down in the depths beneath their manor, and they're using the masquerade as a way to cover the fact that they're conducting these terrible rituals below. So in the version that I was running for my campaign, the characters were hired by the spy master of the Golden Order, the government that runs the spy master of the Queen of the City of Arches. Her name is Rosalind Zesh. And she said to the characters, hey, I need you to infiltrate the Summervine estate during this masquerade ball. I have invitations for you. You'll have to come up with your own costumes. And I want you to go in there and find out what's going on. I want you to find evidence if the Summervines are up to corruption, because Gustav Summervine is actually a council member. He's a counselor on the Golden Council. So if he's corrupt, I need to know why and how, and I need evidence to be able to get him ejected from the council. And is there other weird stuff going on there in the manor? I need you to find out what else is going on. And so that was the kind of setup. You dress up in different garb. By the way, there's people there who know the characters because they've been trying to, they know, for example, that the guard captain, Evandel Grimwalker, the guard captain of the Summervine estate, hired thugs to go attack the characters and dissuade them from trying to discover elements about the Nameless King. So they knew that, like, they're known, but they're also in costume, so that will help. So I set this up as like a heist or infiltration adventure. We actually broke out these kinds of adventure types, and I have one called Infiltration and Heists, which is a type of adventure model that kind of fits the heist model, where you have a goal, you have a situation, you have a location, you have specific things that you need in order to understand exactly how to run an infiltration adventure. There's an article about running infiltration adventures down in the show notes. There was one thing I failed to do that I think would have made the adventure run far smoother. And the thing I wish I would have done is I needed to better clarify the goal. Because I said, find evidence of their evil doings and see if there's anything else weird going on. That is too vague. And it ended up being too vague. When I talked to my wife is in my group, and when I talked to my wife afterwards, and we were discussing what happened, and there were a few different things that happened that I think kind of made the game kind of frustrating for the players that were there. One of them was the fact that one of the characters got beheaded. And their character died. And so that is certainly kind of going to put a little bit of a downer on the situation. And then another player felt kind of responsible for having set up the situation where the first player got beheaded. And then, so there was a few things that, made some significant downbeats. But one of the things that, would have made things a little better and would have set things up better for the future is clarifying the goal. And that's probably the biggest thing I wish I had done when I ran this scenario, was clarifying the goal. And instead of saying, find out if there's something evil going on there, say, we believe there is an evil ritual taking place somewhere on the estate. I want you to infiltrate that ritual and find out what's going on. And if you need to, stop it before it could be a threat to the City of Arches. So if I had said, there is a ritual taking place, you need to find it, then that would stop their motivation of being like, well, we found out they're corrupt, so we're leaving, which is almost what happened, right? The players were like, we need to get out of here. Let's just leave. We have everything we need. Let's leave. Well, they don't have everything they need. There's actually a ritual taking place. And if they're like, well, we'll just call the authorities. Well, the ritual will be over by the time the authorities get here. Also, the authorities don't really go down into this, and they probably wouldn't be able to find it anyway. So it's far more interesting if the characters get involved and figure out that there's a ritual taking place. And spoilers, and if any of my Wednesday players are listening to this, don't listen any further. Spoilers, there is a ritual taking place in the cellars beneath the manor, and the only way to get to the cellars is through these like little secret passages that exist in the upper bedroom of the place and in the main living room area. So what I want to have happen, which is a little railroady, but it's also, there's railroading, and then there's steering the fun towards, steering things towards where the fun is. Right? And where the fun is down here where this evil ritual is taking place. Like, that's a cool thing to do. How they deal with this is up to them, but they probably want to go down there and do it, not just say, well, we saw a bunch of people disappear into the bedroom. That's enough. We're going to leave. It's like, no, your job is to stop the ritual from occurring, right? Stop whatever ritual they're doing. You figure out what it is and stop it is a better way to steer towards the fun than the other way. And I have kind of given them key moments of what was going to happen. So that was probably my number one thing that I really wish I would have done. Probably a secondary thing that I wish I would have done better is make sure that there are more interesting NPCs for them to interact with when they were mingling during the masquerade itself. So the way that the adventure worked out is the players decided, okay, we know that we can't bring weapons there, so we want to smuggle weapons in. So they figured out how to like add weapons into a big box full of different fancy wine, and that the wine would be delivered to the location. So then they could look and see, there's our box full of the weapons in it. Go and grab that, and then if they needed their weapons, they have them. So that was one good option. Then they came in from different sides so that they didn't all come in together. That way they wouldn't all be detected, and they all had different outfits on and stuff like that. And while they were there, they definitely saw some interesting things going on. But I wish I had like maybe at least like 3 or 4, even just like 3 NPCs that they could look at and say, oh, I recognize that person. They're a noble from so-and-so. I wonder if I could go talk to them. Or, oh, look, there's that person, right? And they saw some sinister stuff going on, but no real NPCs for them to talk to. I kind of improvised a couple. And the funny thing is I improvised one and they're immediately like, yeah, I don't want to talk to that guy. And I was like, oh, that was going to be the guy who was going to tell you all this stuff. I guess I'll have to come up with somebody else. So I still wish I had come up with more interesting NPCs. I also could have given more structure to the phases of the events of the masquerade, that there would be like 3 main phases or maybe 4 phases about what was going on there. Phase 1 is everybody arrives. Phase 2 is the great mingling. Phase 3 is the big announcements and the fireworks display and the meals and the fireworks display. And then phase 4 would be the events, the time to go home, right? And I could have said, like, these are the main events, and like they might even get an agenda when they show up. That, okay, at this time these things are going to happen. The Summervines are going to make a big announcement at this time, and that's going to start the fireworks display. And then we go home. And then they would know, okay, well, these are timed events where we know that different things are going to different things are going to go on. And so we want to figure it out. So the characters did explore. They ran into some interesting NPCs. They met a sinister sort of Goliath who was dressed up with like a devil mask on, who seemed to like look at one of the characters who was actually dressed up like the nameless king. And as the guy walked by, he said, "You don't look anything effing like him," and walked by, and they're like, "What was that?" Right? And then they know that that person met with Elvinia Summervine, who's the matron, the elf matron of the Summervine family, that they had a private meeting, the two of them. And that is me setting up like future villain events. And I figured like they're not going to want to deal with that person. That person's going to go have a meeting and then leave. And then other people they kind of talked to. So they saw a lot of stuff. They saw that there were servants who were people dressed up in the same costumes that the servants were dressed up into, but weren't acting like servants. They were sort of directing people away, and they were taking orders directly from Elvinia Summervine. They saw Guston Summervine disappear into his office, or I don't think he even came out. And then he came out of his office, and they snuck in and realized that he's high on mushrooms. And so he came out and started saying a bunch of stuff. And then Elvinia's guard captain, Evandel, took him to the master bedroom and put him to bed, while Elvinia said, "We want to thank all of our guests and friends here tonight and hope you have a great time, and please." And then she had some of those sinister guards started to bring a handful of the nobles up to their bedroom. And everyone's like, there's like 12 of them. What are they doing in that bedroom? That's weird, right? Some kind of strange rich person's bedroom thing. And they're like, well, that's interesting. So then they were, a couple of the more rogue type characters got up to the upper floor, and they went around to some of the windows, and they saw that they knew that that Elvinia and Guston Summervine have a daughter named Venna, and that she's had some trouble recently. So they look in Venna's room and see that there's a big blood pool on the floor, and the place has been turned over. Like a lot of commotion that went on there. So like, and the door was locked from the other side, but they snuck in through the window, and they saw it's not enough blood. It's not like somebody died here, but it's like somebody got hurt here, and the whole place is a wreck. And what's going on here? So they're investigating that room. And then one of the characters is near Elvinia Summervine when she gives her big speech, and he says something like, I wonder if anybody here is from the children of Abraxas. Anybody know anything about the children of Abraxas? Well, Elvinia Summervine knows the children of Abraxas, and then that kind of clued her into the fact that there are people here who are not who they say they are, not who they should be. And she immediately wants to quiet whoever that was. So she sends her guard captain and says, "Go kill that guy." And so the guard captain takes the character by the arm and walks him down the hall to the room, to Venna's bedroom, because there's already, the guard captain, she already knows the room has been turned over and that they already did something there. So she's like, it's a great place to go kill a guy. I'll just take him to that room and kill him. But she can't get in because it's locked. So she tries to unlock it, and they push the key out the other side. And now she knows there's somebody in there that shouldn't be in there. So she kicks open the door, and there's two other characters there. The fourth character is down below, heard the commotion, grabbed the box with all the weapons, went running up the stairs just in case, and like, "Oh, hey, I'm just bringing wine up to the guests upstairs." There's another guard that's up there who's making sure, like, "Hey, if you need to go to the privy to freshen up, there's the door, but don't go to any other doors," right? The guard's trying to make sure that the steer guests to the right places. That guard, kind of sees that something is weird. Our other character, Azara, kind of runs by holding the box full of weapons, runs into the room just in time to see the battle take place, at which point the guard captain draws out her broadsword, or her bastard sword, hacks at the monk character, Johnny Two Beans. Johnny Two Beans disarms her from her first attack, and her blade goes soaring across, and he's a monk gnome, and he goes into karate pose after having disarmed her and goes, "Ha!" And she pulls out a short sword that her holdout short sword, and hits him twice and does 2 critical hits in a row with 2 shots. Now, when you roll 2 critical hits in a row, I think something really extreme should happen. That's a 1 in 400 chance of something occurring. Like, he could have defended himself pretty easily if she'd rolled pretty low and survived. But the first critical hit knocked him out, and the second critical hit was just on the edge of doing enough damage that he should have died. I pushed it over that edge because I thought 2 critical hits in a row, that's a big story beat element. And also, I know the player, and I know that the player would be okay with that happening. Like, the player would be all right, because he's in my Shadow Dark game, and he's died half a dozen times in my Shadow Dark game. So I'm like, she cuts your head off, right? And so Johnny Two Beans is beheaded. And everyone's like, oh my God, Johnny Two Beans is dead. So then the other character who is in the room is a rogue, a poisoner who uses a bow. And he's like, kind of screams like, no. And he pulls out his bow and he fires and he critically hits. And it's with a rogue poisoner, which means he had sneak attack and he had his 2 powerful poison arrows, and all of it is crit. So he did 70, he's level 4, and he did 72 damage in one shot. So he hits her with 2 poison arrows in the throat. She squawks out, spits out weird black poison, falls back on the wall, and now she's dead. So there's now 2 dead people in the room in like 6 seconds. The guard comes running in and is like, oh my God, and he turns to run. Just as Ozara stops him, conks him on the head and knocks him out, and drags him into the room. So now he's in the room too. So now all 4 of our, 3, because one of them's dead. All 3 characters are in the room with their dead friend, the dead guard captain who was sent there to kill one of the other characters who's now still alive, and a guard who is unconscious. And that's where the session ended. So pretty extreme, but again, sounds like, I think we're going to talk about this later and it's going to be awesome. We're all going to be like, man, that was crazy good. But at the time it was a lot of downers, and the downers were, they felt like the players, I think, at least in some circumstances, felt like they completely lost the situation. Like they had gone in there with a plan and the plan went to hell. And that wasn't as fun as if the plan had worked out for them, even though the situation was really interesting. The fact that the plan went haywire was bad. So I think one of the things that we need to do when we're running a sort of heist or infiltration style adventure like this is make sure the players recognize that it's going to be a fiasco. That yes, they can plan to a certain point, but then things are going to happen and they're going to have to react to those things. And it's not going to go smoothly. And in this case, it didn't go smoothly. And I have a really fun, strong start for the next game. So the players were talking about what they're going to do, and they're like, we should just leave. Like, the window's open. We can just dive out and get back into the city, and no one will even know we're here. And, we'll just leave all these dead people. And we know they're corrupt. We know that Gustan is high on mushrooms. We know that they tried to murder people. We have everything we need. Well, in my case, like, that's not the fun. The fun is there's also a ritual going down on in the basement, and I made a bunch of Dwarven Forge for it, and I want them to see the Dwarven Forge. So, I want them to go towards the fun. So now the good news is I have 3 new characters that are going to show up, because I have a friend of mine who's subbing in. He just happens to be in town, so he's going to be playing. I have another friend who's going to be there who wasn't there at the last session. So how his character is involved is going to be interesting. And we have the new character for the player who played Johnny Two Beans is going to show up. So I have 3 new characters, and then the 3 characters that are in the room. And that's going to be a big change. And for the 3 new characters, I could probably say you were given the orders that there is a ritual taking place and it needs to be stopped, and the Golden Knights aren't going to get there in time. And that's a little railroady, like, hey, there's the plot, but it's also like steering towards the fun. The fun is, okay, this crazy event happened here. Now you've got to figure out where the ritual is taking place on the manor and stop it without like getting caught, without hopefully burning the whole place to the ground. Like that would be really nice. So that's a good start. But I think my strong start is going to be, first of all, making sure we get all the characters together. So whoever the new 3 characters are, I want them to get there. But then I think they're also going to be like standing there. The door, by the way, is shattered because the guard captain kicked it open. And I think Gustav, who was put to bed, is going to be standing there in his underwear at the doorway. That's like, half high, looking around at all the dead bodies and looking at the characters and like, and now like, oh my God, the man, like, what are we going to do with him? Right. We have the Lord of the Manor is here. He's high on mushrooms, but he just wandered into our murder scene. Right. And I kind of think of it like the scene in Pulp Fiction where Bonnie comes home. It was the little image of Bonnie coming home when they're getting the body out of the garage. And I think it could be a really fun idea of like, the patron of the house just showed up. And then there's lots of things like, I don't think the patron is Gustav is actually in on the cult stuff. So they might actually be able to sway him. There's options there. I don't know what they're going to do. Hopefully they don't just murder him too. You never know, right? Like you could. So, so where this all comes down to, where I think that this is all important, is that there are certain things that we need to do when we're running these big open-ended sessions where there's lots of agency for the players to do things. We do need to build a strong framework for them to be able to operate inside of that situation. And we need to make sure that the boundaries are really strong. The story driver has to be really strong, and the boundaries need to be strong. And what I wish I had done that I didn't do was really clarify the goal that there is a ritual taking place on here, and you need to figure it out. When I told my wife that, she's like, "Wow, that changes everything. I wish you had said that," right? That there is a ritual taking place on here, and they need to stop it. That's one. Two is, I wish I had built a stronger framework for the events of the night so that we knew what events were going to take place when, and also had better NPCs that the characters could carouse with during the early sessions of the event. I think those would have been good. And then the final thing I would want to do is reinforce to the players that, hey, you guys have a plan, but you're pretty sure things are going to go haywire. Like the situation's going to get away from you, and reacting to the changing situation is as important, if not more important, than whatever plans you put in place originally. If I had reinforced those things up front, I think the event would have been stronger, and I think the players might have had a better time. So those are really the big tips that I want to offer when we're looking at this. Now, I still think that the idea of Secret of Summervine Villa is a fantastic. I love the idea of adventure toolkit that you can use and build your own adventures around, whether it's a quiet infiltration, whether it's a heist, whether it's dealing with a big party that's going on. You can use the stuff that you find in here to build that. And again, this scenario is going to be included in the City of Arches sourcebook, which is live right now on Kickstarter. You can find a link to the City of Arches Kickstarter in the show notes below, and you too can enjoy the Secrets of Summervine Villa. Every month on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we have a monthly Q&A. Anybody who wants to ask an RPG-related question can ask a question there. I answer questions every Friday. I get my nice coffee, my mug, my measuring cup full of coffee, and I enjoy a coffee on Friday mornings going through the Patreon questions and answering every question that is there. Some of those questions make it here to the show where we dive into them a little bit deeper. This first one is actually from two different people, but it's talking about a similar thing that I wanted to talk about on the show today. Ben H says, now that you have read the 2024 Player's Handbook, do you anticipate any of the Forge of Foes math might need to be tweaked or bumped up? I know the characters are generally more powerful, so giving some buffs to your CR table was something I was thinking about doing when the new book comes out. June S. says, what do you think of the current state of monster challenges in comparison to the 5e24 Player's Handbook classes? So both of those questions kind of hit on a certain thing, and that is, from my perspective specifically, does the math for Forge of Foes have to change? And does the lazy encounter benchmark need to change? Do either of those things need to change? Right now, my short answer is no. And the way that I came to that answer is looking at it from a couple of different perspectives. One is when I look at the monsters that are in the D&D 2024 Player's Handbook, and they only go from like there's like CR0 to CR1, so it's not a big range. It doesn't give you a CR1 but when I look at those monsters, they're pretty close to what the Forge of Foes monster stats do. I think the CR1 half monsters do a little bit more damage in 2024 Player's Handbook than we did in Forge of Foes. But we actually tuned down the CR1 halves because they used to be a little too strong. They were doing like even back in the 2014 Player's Handbook, thugs had pack tactics and did 10 damage at CR1 half, and we thought that was a little too strong. So we tuned down the 1 half a little bit, and that tuning can still be just fine. The skeleton in D&D 2024 hits pretty hard. It's a +5 to hit for 6 damage, which is up from the +4 to hit for 5 damage. And that's a CR1 quarter. Our CR1 quarter is like +3 for like 4 points of damage. So we actually are under on like a CR1 quarter. Do we need to change it? I don't think we actually need to change it, because I think it still works just fine. But there were a couple of little odds and ends like that. But generally speaking, and at the CR1 category, everything was pretty much on par. That our CR1s and the CR1s that were inside the 2024 Player's Handbook did match up. Now, of course, that's just a 2024 Player's Handbook, but it was a lot of monsters. There's like 30 monsters that are inside the 2024 Player's Handbook. So one thing that's important to consider when we're looking at like these different monster stats at different levels is variance within a challenge rating is all over the place anyway. That if you look at any challenge rating for any of the monster books that are out, particularly for like the 2014 Monster Manual, if you're looking at that one, the variance among a challenge rating was all over the place. That some of them were really hard, some of them were really weak. I used to laugh about the CR1 half seahorse that would kick the crap out of it. There was like giant seahorse, and the giant seahorse would kick the crap out of people because it did like 14 damage at CR1 or something. It was ridiculously, hit really, really hard. But you're like, well, how often do you face a giant seahorse? And the answer is not very often. So there's a lot of variance within a challenge rating anyway, is one thing to consider. And something else to consider is that the variance of 5e is already really high anyway, because we roll a 20-sided die. And, when you roll a 20-sided die, every side is 5%. You are just as likely to roll a 2 as you are an 18, right? That there's no bell curve on it. And because the die is so high variance, it means that the specific stats that you have are not really going to tell you too much about how a monster is going to play in a battle, because it could just miss all the time, or it could hit every time. Or, like I just talked about, I could do 2 critical hits in a row. That granted 1 in 400 chance, but 2 critical hits in a row with a single veteran is deadly to a 4th level character, right? So things are going to go all over the place anyway. There's a lot of variance inside of a CR, which tells me I don't think we need to tweak these too much. Are we saying we never will? No, I actually talked to Scott and Teos about this, and our general consensus is like, we'll see. Like, we'll probably have to see how the monster manual looks in February of 2025, but also we're probably going to see how things play out over time. One thing that I consider is I don't look at the D&D 2024 book as the only one. I look at Tales of the Valiant, I look at Level Up Advanced 5e, and I think a lot of people are still going to be playing 2014 D&D. So if that's the case, it's not necessarily a factor of us changing the challenge rating stuff to fit one book. It's, do these stats work well across all of those books? And if they work well enough, I think they're fine. I said that the proficiency bonus was +4 for our CR14. It's actually +3. So the short answer is I don't think we're going to need to. I think that these stats will work just fine. I think they will work just as fine as using the 2014 monsters would work if you were running in any other variant. But also, like, we tuned this around. So Tales of the Valiant wasn't out at the time, but we tuned this around our own understanding of monster challenge rating, the Dungeon Master's Guide from 2014, the Monster Manual from 2014, Paul Hughes' work that he did over on Blog of Holding, and the monster math from Level Up Advanced 5e. We looked at all of those things when we were looking at these charts and built the balance around those. And I think that they're pretty strong. Now, one other monster we looked at was there was a preview of a green dragon, an ancient green dragon that had been shown. And we looked at the stat block for the ancient green dragon and compared that to this, and it was on par as well. The ancient green dragon had more hit points, like 50 more hit points than we had here. I think, like, specifically it was like CR 20 or something like that. I don't remember. It had like 350 and we had 300. But other than that, the damage output was the same. The attack bonuses were the same. Armor class made sense. Like, all of our stats fit that model pretty well. Now, again, we just don't have enough to be sure. So my answer is, for the monster statistics by challenge rating, we probably don't need to change it. Then the other question is, what about the lazy encounter benchmark? So the lazy encounter benchmark is actually published in about 3 different places right now, maybe 4 if you include like my blog and stuff like that. We published it in Forge of Foes. I have it in the Lazy DM's Companion, and I also did a similar one when I was commissioned by Kobold Press to write the encounter building guidelines to Tales of the Valiant. And this is how the benchmark works. An encounter may be deadly if the sum total of monster challenge ratings is greater than 1/4 of the sum total of character levels. For characters of 1st to 4th level, or greater than 1/2 the sum total of character levels for characters of 5th level and above. So basically, you count up all of the character levels that you have and then divide it by 4, and that's your deadly threshold. Now, it doesn't guarantee a deadly threshold, and I even have a little thing that we wrote about. What exactly does deadly mean? And we say, like, most characters are going to lose more than half their hit points. Several characters might go unconscious. But we say, hey, by the way, lots of things can change this. Lots of circumstances can change this, because, again, the D20 is very flexible. But also, character builds can change a lot. Number of characters matter. Synergy of the characters, the situation they're getting in. Everything can kind of change this. So when I think about the encounter benchmark and how that might change, depending on now, and again, it's not just D&D 2024. Tales of the Valiant characters are more powerful. Level Up Advanced 5e characters are more powerful. So of the 3 most recent versions of 5e that have come out in the past couple of years and now are out and then some are right on their way, all of the characters got more powerful. Instead of changing what the math is for the encounter benchmark, I would change its definition. And I would probably change this definition that instead of saying an encounter might be deadly, is I would say, a loose gauge of a hard encounter is this. So you would still do the same math of take the total number of character levels, divide it by 4, and that would be your benchmark for characters of 1st to 4th level. And that would be kind of the equivalent of a hard encounter. instead of a deadly encounter. So we basically take the definition and shift the definition of what it means rather than changing the math. So then you say, well, what's deadly? You say, well, it's above that, like significantly above that is you're leading into deadly territory. Rather than worrying about like having specific lines in the sand of what they are. Level Up Advanced 5e does have that. They have like specifically, this is what easy, medium, hard, or deadly would be. I really think that it's better to just have a loose gauge in your head because, again, it's not going to be accurate anyway. It's not going to be 100% accurate. And it's easier to look at that. Now, in Tales of the Valiant, for example, they do have stronger characters, and we are still using the same encounter benchmark baseline for Tales of the Valiant that I'm using in the encounter benchmark because I wrote both. So in the Tales of the Valiant Monster Vault, they have the determining encounter difficulty section. This is the section that I wrote, was edited by them and included, and it still has the benchmark of if the characters are 1st to 4th level, the benchmark is equal to 1/4 of total PC levels rounded down. Now in here, we call it the challenging encounter benchmark. So we shifted it from deadly to challenging, basically saying this is going to be roughly a challenging, but if you see, there's this big section on like, what are the variables that are going to include the number of PCs, the synergy of the PCs, the environment, the experience of the players, what magic items, spells, abilities, and NPC allies they have, the monster combinations you're using, and how well rested the PCs are. Those are all variables that are going to change the overall feeling of a battle, regardless of the total number of challenge ratings compared to the character's level. But we still want to have some kind of benchmark. One nice thing that Tales of the Valiant has is it has a nice table here, where you have like the average PC level, the number of PCs, that tells you what the benchmark is. It also tells you like the minimum CR before like the monster's totally useless and the maximum CR before it gets to be challenging. I bet you as you get to higher levels, this maximum CR could actually be higher than this. But you can see like if you have average of 16th level, then 24, CR 24. But recall that the monsters in Tales of the Valiant and the Monster Vault are really tough. They hit really, really hard. So this is another example of like where the challenge is going to be much higher, but the benchmark still works. That is a really long way of saying that right now, with what we know, what I know about it, and what like Scott and Teos and I have looked at and things like that, A, we're going to have to see what it really looks like. But B, it's already still working with all of the systems that are out there now. Maybe the definition shifts from deadly over to like more like hard or challenging, but we can still use the lazy encounter benchmark and we can still use the Forge of Foe stats because they also hit a little on the hard side anyway. So the Forge of Foe stats are going to work just fine. So I don't think we're going to have to change much, but we'll have to see. Kay says, I am a professional DM and have been running paid games for 4 years now. What are your feelings about paid DMs running your products like Grendelroot, Fantastic Adventures, or the upcoming City of Arches? Is this something you would be okayed with, provided credit? Absolutely. I could make all kinds of jokes, but I'm not going to make any jokes because I don't want to complicate things. You absolutely have my permission in any space to run Ruins of the Grendelroot, Fantastic Adventures, any of the other fantastic books I have, the City of Arches. Absolutely feel free to run them. I would, of course, appreciate it if you're doing it online, that you link back to my Sly Flourish website or to the product itself. That would be great. Do you have to? No. The only real thing that I would be worried about at all, do not publish the full PDF on the open internet. That's the only thing I'm worried about. Like, I don't want to have it where the PDF of my product is out there on the open internet and anybody can just go and download it without paying for it. That's not great. I offer really big samples of all of my products so that people can really see what it's like. These are table usable samples that are not just an example of what are in the books, but actually things that you can use, things that are valuable on their own. I do make those available on the Sly Flourish bookstore so that you can download them and you can take a look at what you're going to be purchasing. And so I try hard to make sure that there is lots of free material for people to use. I also publish a lot of material in a Creative Commons license so that you can download it. Like older books of mine, the original Lazy Dungeon Master, Epic Tier Games, the original Dungeon Master tips, those are all available under Creative Commons licenses. You can download the entire books and the text for the entire books for free. I also have 2 reference documents, one for Monsters, which comes from Forge of Foes, and one from my other Lazy DM books that's not only freely available for you to be able to download and do whatever you want with, but those are available under commercial licenses so that you can actually use them in your own commercial works. So I give away a lot, but I don't want to give everything away. So I don't want the full PDF of the book to be available on the net. But as far as showing it in a streaming show, as far as reviewing it on a video, as far as running it in a public setting, you absolutely have my permission to run any of the products that I've got. And it would be great if you would link back, if you have the opportunity to link back or reference both slyflourish.com and wherever you found the book, wherever people could pick up the book. That would be excellent. Is it like an absolute requirement? No, not really, but it would be really great if you did. That's really all I ask. So thank you for asking, but I am definitely definitely happy for people to be able to use the products that they bought. Certainly in paid games, I have no problem with you using my product for you to run in your games or to run in a streaming game or to review on YouTube or anything like that. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today while we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. Again, if you love the work that I do, please check out the City of Arches sourcebook. If you're already backing it and you're excited about it, please tell your friends. Go out on your favorite social media sites, talk to people about it, send the link around, show people, mention the 42-page sample so they can check it out themselves. That would be really, really awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a great day and get out there and play an RPG.